Welcome back to another Industry Leaders podcast episode. I'm your host, Maria Birova, Clean Health Master Coach and WBFF Pro. We have a special guest today, and I do accredit a lot of my competitive career success to him, as he has shaped me from an amateur to a pro to a top placing competitive pro athlete within the WBFF. But without further hesitation, let's bring Nathan Harewood onto our podcast. Without further ado, let's kick off this podcast. I did give you a little brief introduction. I did mention to our listeners who have been following along, especially with my prep going into this year in the podcast, that I do accredit a lot of my success in the WBFF to you, as you've seen me and helped me transform from an amateur to a pro to a top placing competitive pro and future champion. Okay, we're going to put that into existence. But for those who are not super familiar with you, give us a little bit of a background of like the years of your career, especially going into the fitness industry, because you have heaps of experience, and give us a little bit more about you.
The years. I mean, I was just telling people that I've been in the business for 22 years. There it is, right? So it was literally, and then you see people starting to do the math. You're like, okay, 22 years. When did you start doing this? And it was really only going to be a 6-month job. And, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this for 6 months because you want to be the cool guy that's, the trainer. And you get to wear track pants and T-shirts. And then 6 months, I'm going to grow up and get a career. 22 years later, I'm still waiting for that career change. But it's been a blessing being able to be almost, I don't want to say the start of where fitness became mainstream, but where it could actually become a career, to now you see, without undermining it, hundreds of thousands of coaches are out there, now doing what you thought would never be an opportunity. So it's been great, from competitors, 22 years from working in a gym to have my own gym to where I am now. It's just been a great journey of hills and valleys, but life lessons that I would never not want to have.
Yeah. Well, our podcast, the Industry Leaders podcast, right? I would definitely say that you embody what it means to be an industry leader, especially given how long you've been coaching. Talk to us a little bit about how, the comparison of like the first few years of coaching, how you said you had started off with those 6 months of just trying to be that coach, to transitioning and growing your business to the extent that you have it at this moment.
Whew. I mean, how many hours do you have? It is the biggest thing that I found is back then when it first started, you didn't have Instagram. You didn't, Facebook was just starting, but you didn't have, everybody wasn't posting their whole life. There was no stories. Yeah. So the development that I had to get on how to reach people, how to talk to them, how to go out and market, and how to go out and create a business.
Yeah.
It was harder then, but it created that passion for now. Yeah. The industry, you have technology where it's a great convenience, but people think, oh, all I need to do is get a following, post, and now I'm going to make a ton of money, because there is a lot of money. The fitness industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But
and it's continuing to grow in that direction.
It's so hard where if you don't have your foundation, if you don't have your bumps and bruises, if you don't know what your North Star is, you're chasing fads, right? And that's the biggest thing I found, is starting out at the beginning where you weren't worrying about popularity. You just wanted to make enough money to pay for your phone bill, and getting the foundation of how to talk to people, how to do program design, how to understand how humans work in interaction is invaluable. But now that technology is here, it's great to get that information out to more people. Where before,
we have much greater reach.
Send a mail, right? You're writing a letter, put it in the mailbox, or you send an email or stuff like that. And
page your clients. No, just kidding. That's a little too far.
There might have been a phone call. Oh man, I was cold. No. I was cold calling back in the day where literally you would pick up a phone book and I was calling numbers. Hey, are you working out? What are your fitness goals?
Oh my God.
And it was because it was the numbers game. Yeah. And we didn't have Instagram. We didn't have it. So we didn't have LinkedIn. So literally, hi,
Oh my God. It's like those calls that we all shut at the minute that we pick up the phone and we're not recognized. Okay, bye-bye. Scammer likely, right? It shows up on our iPhones now. We make sure to shut the phone. Now, when you mentioned you coach in person, do you continue to coach in person while coaching online clients as well? Are you still in an actual physical gym facility as a coach?
Up until COVID, I was still full time. Like up until 2 years ago, I was still on the floor 20 to 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
And so it's almost full time plus my online. I'm now back on the floor working with people, but it's now something I enjoy, right? Where, 20 hours
Yeah.
a week, you're onto your sixth hour, that session that day. You're tired and it's a fresh start. They're excited to see you because they're getting into their session. The fact that you're at your
Yeah.
seventh one, sixth one, it doesn't matter. But now that I've kind of
Yeah.
scaled that back, it gives me time to build my business and work on where I want to take it versus before I
Yeah.
was just working in the business 24/7 instead
Yeah.
of on it. So it's nice to have the option of being on the floor, but it will always be a
Yeah.
part. It's just not going to be the part of my job.
Yeah, and I think that across speaking to a lot of coaches, especially on our podcast, one of the things that really does stick out, especially now when it comes to like the online platform, a lot of coaches become coaches and just jump into the online platform. One of the trickiest parts about that is not learning how to coach, right? Because it's easy to learn the knowledge, the science, and the methods, but it's about applying them, right? And being a personable coach and understanding what it means to take everything you know and nitpick things specifically for one client. And there are certain things, especially when it comes to like training, that may be tricky at times if you haven't coached in person. That's like a skill you learn in person, and then you're able to really translate that online as well. How do you think that you do that really well with your online clients? What are some tips that you have about taking what you know in person and translating that for your online clients? How do they get that same experience from your coaching?
I think the biggest difference is the passion that you create beforehand. And when
Yeah.
people get to see, oh, wow, this guy's, this person, guy or girl, that trainer, or for me, it was just, wow, he's really into it. He's all about fitness. He's all about coaching. But it's also like your social media is your resume. And that's that
Yeah.
it advertised for you 24 hours, 7 day a week. So when I first started going through it, I'm like, okay, what do I want people to see 24/7? I don't want them
Yeah.
to confuse what my job is or what my business is. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest ability, is creating that trust. Because you
Yes.
send a message, someone sends you an email. You don't know what their voice sounds like. You don't know what their eating plan is, but then you have to, through technology, is to create that trust. So it's all about the
Yeah.
wording and making sure that, hey, you know what? I'm here for you. Whether I'm next
Yeah.
door, whether I'm in the same country, different country, I'm still there. We
Yeah.
have WhatsApp, we have virtual training. So it's letting people know that, you know what? I care.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Still creating that human connection through the virtual world, right? That we have. And yeah, I mean, now we're tapping into an actual virtual world, which kind of creepy, but I'm saying like even with FaceTimes and stuff like that, that still a way for us to connect. And I think especially during COVID, a lot of in-person coaches were also forced to get uncomfortable if they weren't, on the online scheme of like introducing themselves to using virtual sessions and getting comfortable with that. And you can still be a really great coach only online. Like as long as you're connecting that, creating those personal relationships and trust, then you're going to have a partnership with your client instead of you just telling them what to do and then struggling to actually comply, right? So going into that, we talk about, I mentioned it at the beginning as well, you do coach a lot of WBFF competitors, and you are known as one of the top in the industry for the WBFF. You are a 3 times WBFF Coach of the Year. You've coached 57 and counting world
I got to
titles.
update that.
And
Yep, but yep.
yeah, I know that's wrong because that's changed, and I know the teammates who have been crowned and getting those titles. Plus, you have endless amounts of amateurs to pros. Now, what inspired you to get into coaching specifically for the WBFF? Talk to us a little bit about choosing that federation to coach for and how you became so close with the WBFF.
It's a great story where the whole NPC, the IFBB, that was pretty much all there was. Now in Canada, there's no IFBB, they have the CBBF, all these other letters in the alphabet, and it was so established. And,
Yeah.
coming into it, and I've done a few shows and getting into the circuit because my background was high performance athletics. And I got in a couple car accidents. I couldn't do any contact sports. So naturally this was progression. But
Yeah.
for me, what was happening with the WBFF was there was something new. And, through some experiences and things that I were knowing, as you're looking at the corporate ladder of some massive corporations, federations, you realize
Yeah.
that there is a hierarchy. And being in Canada and trying to fight that, where, let's be real. At that time, Odo Angels. If you weren't an Odo's Angels, you weren't getting anywhere on those stages.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, do I want to play that game to get to that level to have the whole world see my expertise? Where at that time I was
Yeah.
still traveling around. I was doing workshops and seminars, teaching coaches how to become successful coaches, doing women empowerment seminars. So I was already traveling around and training some IFBB pros. And,
Yeah.
the WBFF was coming to my town, and I had the attitude. I'm like, oh, here comes another, corp federation. Here comes another show. What a joke. It's just like another one of these things. But then
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go watch. So I watched the show. And before I watched the show, I sent a message to Paul. And I'm like, hey, Paul, I'm a, local coach. You guys are having a show. I want to learn about it. What's it about? What's so different about what you're presenting? And he responded and said, hey, how about a free ticket to my show? And let's talk after and let me know what you think.
And around what year was this?
2011.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
so back in 2011. Could have been 2010. I lost a year in COVID somewhere, but 2010-ish. And so what happened, I went to saw the show, and it was so different because you're so used to this rah, guys and girls, rah, right? And people are going nuts. Guys are getting drunk and wasted in the audience. There's tank tops, there's fanny packs. It was almost underground then. But then you went over there, and it was different, where you had gowns and theme wear and stuff. I'm like, all right, this is cool. Yeah. And so after the show, I went to him. I think you really have something there, where there are people that love to work out, but they're scared of all the stereotypes of the meathead personas that were given from other classes. And he goes, well, that's, thank you very much. If you ever want to judge one of the shows, let me know. And I kind of let him know that I was, traveling and doing workshops and seminars, like I previously mentioned. And I said, if I can take or help or connect you with people in other countries, I'll be more than happy to. And I was in Iceland, and I was training Monica Brandt back in the day, if people are in their history of Monica Brandt.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, how would you like to come to Iceland? I think I have the good connections. And Paul's like, hey, I'll talk to them. And it actually turned into, wow, it turned in, we're getting a show in Iceland. And we're great. So he goes, why don't you be a judge? Okay. Now, I'm going to make the story short, but it's funny because how I got into emceeing and traveling around is all of a sudden there was an MC there. There was 3,000 people at this show. It was, I've never seen a show like this. There was 120, 130 people in the show. All of a sudden, woof, it was like all of Iceland showed up, like 3,000, not even stretching the truth, showed up. The auditorium was full. They had to fill. They put TVs outside in the waiting room, so people were standing and watching. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. They had performers coming out, and there was an MC. And the MC was terrible. He was like, welcome to the WBFF. Hello, everybody. And so it was, and I'm not even lying. It was, if you talk to Paul, he'll say the same voice. And all of a sudden, Paul was like, you know what, buddy? Oh, you're murdering the show, because no one was having 3,000 people were bored. So Paul's like, Nate, take over the mic. I'm like, I've never emceed a show. I was just public speaking. So I grabbed the mic and away we went. And after that, Paul and I created a great bond, and I would say a professional bond, where I didn't say I want to become Paul's friend, or I didn't want to become close to Paul to help leverage my business. And as the business went and started expanding, Paul's like, do you want to start traveling and start emceeing more shows and doing some more workshops and, answering some Q&As? And that's how my involvement came with the WBFF. And I even sent a letter, because I had my own spray tan business, and I sent a letter to the ABBA saying, do you guys want any more help? What can I help you with? I got nothing. So I'm like, all right, thank you very much. I'm going to go where I'm wanted. And that was how the WBFF me and the WBFF became a success story.
And a lot of your work shows through your athletes, right? And I think a lot of successes for coaches does come from, the people that they work with. And even it doesn't mean that you have to have only champions on your team to be a successful coach, but it's that the embodiment of the mentality that you build within these types of clients. So what would you say are a few qualities that, these champions, these pros, these amateurs aspiring to be pros that you work with all embody? What is something that you would want to say to every amateur to embody when growing into becoming a pro athlete, a crown athlete, especially when it comes to the WBFF?
I know the answer to this because I got the biggest thing that I find, the top three, I'll try to keep it to three. It's almost their mindset, where when a person goes to the gym, a world champion or a soon to become world champion, you can tell it's within them, because they go to the gym not to prove that they aren't a failure. They're going to the gym to become a better version of themselves. So when they're working out, they're not going, oh, I wonder if my boyfriend loves me. Oh, I wonder if I'm going to get fit. Oh, I wonder if my belly's sticking out. Oh, I don't know why I don't have more followers. Where that's not a China, but then if you look at a champion, mindset, they're in there, headphones on. They're so social. Hey, how's your day? How's everything going? Have a great day. Nice to see you. Hey, Jim. And then when it's time to work, completely different. Boom. They're focused. They're in it. They're like, and they're knowing that they're making their body. They're visualizing it. But they also realize that it doesn't stop at the gym. So tip number one is your mindset. It isn't food. You hear coaches all over the place. Oh, it's 100% nutrition. It's all about nutrition. It's all about the gym. They're both wrong, because the gym hasn't changed. The food in the grocery stores hasn't changed. Our mindset is what makes the difference. So they're coming in, they're there to train with purpose. They aren't defeating themselves. Number two, they know that the gym is the smallest part. It is where you're going to go ahead and build the building blocks. But if you're not fueling their body, so when they're done the workout, you don't see them grabbing 6 donuts, or you don't see them going somewhere else for 2 hours. They know nutrition, your fuel, is very, very important. So they stick to it. They're most consistent. So that'd be number two, consistent towards your goal. Number three is, want to guess?
No.
They're planners.
I don't want to be wrong.
They are planners.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I feel like all those three. And I think another thing, and this is kind of putting it all together, you have to think like a pro. You want to think like a champion, so then you can act like a champion, act like a pro. You have to, whatever your goal is, and I've mentioned this prior on this podcast, is you have a goal in mind, right? It may seem like near impossible or so far from, being reachable or out of your comfort zone. You have to be that person before you be that person, right? Before you actually are going to shape into that person, you have to act like what that person would act like. So like, for example, with my own experience, as an amateur, every single time I walked into the gym, I was like, what would a pro be doing, right? Is a pro, like, I asked myself that, is a pro going to complain, cheat the workout, not do this, and I go through those motions, right? Once I became a pro, I was like, okay, what does a world champ, a crown champion act like? What are the behaviors that I need to embody that will one day bring me that success? And too often people get caught up in the little things like meal timing, training, supplements. I need to hire this. It's a lot less detailed than that. You just really need to like nail down that mindset. And that's something that, especially working with you guys can all see just from the conversations we're having, why I love Nathan so much. It's that embodiment of a true athlete, regardless of the titles given, regardless of your placings and what level of your goals are. You have to be that athlete before you become the person you want to be, right?
Yep. Very few people set themselves up and believe they're going to fail and succeed. And it's just, it's the law of averages. Like as a coach, I didn't get to where I am now by not believing in myself, where every day I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong? Where do I need to work in? Where do I need to evolve? And every single day, but I don't make it complicated. It isn't complicated. There are a lot of coaches out there that try to make it so detailed that at 12:15, take this pill, 1:45, take this pill, 2:95, you have 300 milliliters of water. it isn't that difficult, and trying to make it more difficult doesn't make it a better product. It's probably going to make
Yeah.
people more confused, and
Yeah. I
it
agree.
has to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing. If you're not enjoying, I mean, obviously, granted, there are going to be days where you hate what you're doing or you really want to give up. Don't get me wrong when I say that. But if you're not really enjoying what you're doing, or like when for like competitors or competitive clients, if they're not enjoying the actual competition or the process, then that's a red flag. There's no reason to put yourself in a hole if you don't enjoy, the end of that. So I think it's like pulling back, whether win or lose, you have to enjoy it. That's especially with competitive career. You're gonna win, you're gonna lose. You're gonna have to learn to enjoy both and learn that both of them will equate to growth, right? So what would you say is like one of the most challenging parts about coaching competitive athletes versus like your general population lifestyle clients? What is one thing that's most challenging on your end as a coach?
I think the most challenging side is making sure a client's first show is the best show because they're the most excited. Everything is brand new. But now, as you starting working with more seasoned veterans, as they're working up the corporate, the placings, they've gotten crowns, their expectations almost become so high that they're now having that mindset of an amateur. So the hardest part for a coach is just making sure that, this was me 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months ago, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, stop. Let's just focus on what's next. Our first job and task at hand, and be honest, we have to beat who you were last year. So comparing yourself to last year isn't going to help because everyone else is looking at that picture. And if 10 people beat that picture and you look the same, you're now 11th. So the hardest part is just making sure that their mindset doesn't get too far ahead of their expectations is too soon. You don't need to be stage ready till that show day. So if you're 6 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 2 weeks out, oh, I'm not stage ready. Good, because the show's not tomorrow. Oh, I guess that's true.
Right, exactly.
Oh, but this girl looks good. Great. Let's see how she looks on stage day. Oh, that's true. Right? So
it's what, and that stage day, I think that's another thing, with competitive athletes, it's what matters most is that moment that you're on that stage, not before backstage, not the morning of. It's literally what you present in front of those judges in that 5 to 10 minute time period, even less, that you're on that stage. That's all. And I know it can be sounding a little bit intimidating because you put months and months of work for like a fraction of a second what it feels like in comparison to the amount of work you put in. But that's just the truth. You can stand next to somebody who's diced and super shredded, but if they're boring on stage, they're not placing. So it's like, especially when it comes to the WBFF, and I've had a conversation with, fellow competitors in different federations, it's like talking about how different it is. And knowing, and we had this, I talked with you right away after show, and I made sure I posted about this as well. And I've had these conversations. It's whether I place first or not at all, I show up to work the next day to improve, right? When we win, that victory, that like excitement lasts one day, and then the next day you're already worrying about the next goal. So it's like so many times I see athletes or teammates or friends get so caught up in like, I need to win, I have to win, why didn't I win? It's, you need to really shape your mindset around being that athlete that takes a win and a loss as success, right? If for me, it's like, if I lose, I don't think I lost. Placing top 5 for me did more of like a, you're close, but you're not there yet. So that means you have work to do. You have homework to do, right? So it's like, it's exciting. That's the whole point of this career, right? And the whole point of doing this, it's to be a constant state of improvement. And that definitely is that one thing where it's like, we do check-ins with our coaches and we get in our heads and we're like, I'm not ready. Well, it doesn't matter. That's a really good point. It doesn't matter until that day. And we have to really, as coaches, if you have competitive athletes as clients, keep them grounded. And sometimes there are clients you have to remind each and every day, like, relax. Some clients are like, I got this. Yep. It's no big deal, right?
100. And that's exactly it. It's a hobby. It is. Let's be real. Nobody in this history of competing makes $1 million from one show. Nobody, very few people have become, in the history of fitness competing, have become millionaires. Yeah. There's more people often than not, they're spending their student loan monies, they're maxing out their credit cards, they're working an extra job. And it's when you have a hobby that you're so passionate about, you have to remind yourself it's a hobby. And if your first time is your best time, and it just goes down from there, it's not a hobby.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you said, it's a constant improvement. It's a car, shoes, whatever someone's making. Oh wow, look at that. Oh, I love that suit. I love that. Oh, I don't like that. It's a learn. Every time you go to the show, there's winning and learning. Even when you're winning,
Yes.
you now have to learn how to win again.
Yes. And I like that. I like winning and learning, not winning and losing. And I think if more athletes embody that and more coaches encourage that type of mentality, you're going to see a lot stronger, body of athletes that really, dive into that passion. And of course, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be disappointment, especially when you're trying to push yourself and hold yourself to a standard, but use that as fuel and drive to push yourself, right? Not hold back. Because we all know that there are times that we potentially might be holding back from our effort, from the way we think, the way we do things. So it's a learning opportunity. And I really like that. I'm going to continue using that. Winning and learning. Love it. And now when it comes to tight deadlines to show dates, and you say, you're not ready until that day of show. But what do you do, like, say, if an athlete goes off of plan, like overeats, gets sick, misses some training sessions? How do you navigate, fixing that and helping them still be ready in time? What are some, foolproof tips you have as a coach to really navigate those time periods when the client isn't as compliant?
Well, it's the first thing I always tell everyone is there is no such thing as a perfect prep. It is virtually impossible to have everything spot on. Every single show that you do, or every time you transform your body, I'm just going to say shows means transformation. So every show you do, there's always going to be something you can improve, and write it down. Make a list. Okay, this show, I did 20 things I could have done better. Great. This next show, I'm going to try to do 15. And that's what it is, there is margin of error. There is room. You can get away with a lot and still look good on the stage, but you don't know how much that is. And so when I talk to people and they have the bad day, the bad week, is understanding, okay, is this a bad week because of stress? And now that their body is overstressed, because now through their head, they've said some of the worst things to themselves. They've destroyed themselves. And a coach's responsibility isn't to add. Where you see coaches where, it is fun. Where, like, am I allowed to cuss?
Oh, of course.
Okay. So, if you're sitting there and there's some coaches out there and somebody screws up on their diet and they're like, oh, you piece of, and I've heard this, you piece of shit. Oh, you're wasting my time. You're fucking dumb. This is so, and they just drive home how bad they did. And my way is I want to constructive build them. So I'm like, look, if you stay on this path, we're not going to get to where you need to get to. I understand if you're going through things and you're going through stress, but now that you're stressed, how can we counter that stress to still get on the path? So I'm more about, here's your problem. Where do we get a solution? If you had a bad week because of stress, don't worry about it. If you missed a couple meals, if your body still looks good, don't worry about it. Don't make a little ripple into a wave, because more often than not, if you have a little mess up in a week or a couple weeks here and there, it's not going to change the final product, but your mentality of it will, because stress, again, water weight, digestion slows, hormones change. So a lot of it, again, mindset's number one, is just making sure that they're in the right mindset. They realize, I just had cake. Okay, coach says no problem. Let's keep going. We keep going. Trust the process.
And I think the biggest thing is, like, for coaches that are listening, or aspiring coaches, competitive coaches especially, but this goes for any kind of coaches, there is a tough love where you're, like, going to be very, like, transparent with the clients that you're working with, but also understand we're human. And especially when we're down, I've had my days as well. The last thing I need is for someone else to say the things that I'm already saying to myself about how frustrated I am. How can I do this? Like, and that's where, as a coach, you have to kind of put your ego aside and kind of be like, all right, what does this person need right now? Do they need that, like, tough push where it's like, okay, come on now, like, this has been happening X amount of times? Or do you see that this person really just needs a little bit of, like, effort, like a push of, like, I'm here, it's fine, this is how we can fix it. But if you continue doing this, this is the results of those actions. Like, you have to be real and understand that there's a person on the other side of that phone, right? And you as a coach serve, yes, as their, the book of knowledge for guiding them to their goals, but you're also someone that they trust, right? That's a big thing. So imagine having the person you trust the most in your most vulnerable state at the beginning, when you feel like you're not confident in yourself, telling you that, you suck. Why did you do that? That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
absolutely terrible. And I've had experiences like that in the past prior to working with you. And I think, as a young girl, 14, being told those things when I first started training, it messes you up for a long
Oh,
time. So if you are a coach listening to this, be mindful of how you go about constructive criticism and those things. That doesn't mean you have to walk on thin ice, right? You can have that type of conversation with the person you're working with, but don't be an asshole. There's no need for that. Like, these are people paying you to help them and they trust you. Don't be an asshole. That's just as simple as that. But there are assholes
oh,
out there,
there's so
and
many in the
it's
same, like you just nailed it, where they have to feel confident that they can come to you with their mistakes, because that's your job as a coach.
yes,
Improve bodies or correct mistakes. And they're like, you know what?
yeah,
I'm going to tell my coach what I did. And you're going to do what? Yeah, I'm going to tell my coach I didn't train all week. No, right? And then they're like, no, 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 watch. And they're like, hey, coach, I had a
yeah,
bad week, because you need to have that open line of communication. Because if they have to feel scared, they're not going to be
they
honest
won't tell
with
you.
you. And then the end result is going to be terrible. And we know as coaches, we're the first to get the blame and the last to get the
Right.
praise. And you
Yes,
have to mitigate that as
yes,
much
yes.
as we can.
Yeah, so like taking responsibility, as I get to see both sides as being an athlete and a coach myself. So like I hold myself to that standard of knowing, hey, if I'm going to have a shit week, I'll let you know, because I know what it feels like when I know that clients aren't being compliant, but they're not telling me, but I can physically see it, right? As coaches, we have that eye. We'll know without you telling us, whether it's through the way you're talking, to the way you physically look, to the measurements, like we'll know something is up. So being transparent is just the best way. And the only way to do that is creating that trust and relationship, right? So yeah, I get to see that. I've had my days too. Everybody has those days,
Coaches have
right?
those days.
Sounding like Hannah Montana now. Now, so going into a little bit more about like choosing the right category for you, because I know sometimes this could be a little bit tricky, right? Depending on the different federations, the way your body's changing. So what do you recommend for coaches when it comes to advising clients how to make decision what category to compete in? And also, if they aspire to be in a category, what does that look like as a transformation? So you can talk primarily about the WBFF categories and knowing what to look for.
I think the biggest mistake that coaches make is they decide what category that person's going into. Where my first question is, what's the body? Well, my first question is, are you competing for you or are you competing to win? Because they can be two different looks.
Yes.
The look that you love the best may not match what they're looking for. So, like, I want to win.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that your opinion doesn't matter on how you look, what body would you like to have to lose to? They're like, what? Why am I losing? I'm like, because if the show doesn't go how you want, and all you want it to be is a bikini girl, and you're walking around as the figure of fitness girl, you're going to be miserable. And they're like, oh, I would
Yeah.
love to, I would love to be fitness. Then you look at it and say, okay, right now you're bikini. So let's start training you for fitness, and eventually you'll grow yourself out, because when the show is done,
Yeah.
you need to have a body that you love. And that's just how I present it. So I
Yes.
let them pick it. But if all of a sudden someone, let's say, Stephanie, if I didn't know
Yeah.
Stephanie, she came to me and said, hey, Nate, I want to do bikini. You sure? Yep. And then I would let her know how much of a step down that's going to be, where, okay, this is going to be hardest goal. We're going to have to starve off the muscles. Are you okay losing your last 13
Yeah.
years of hard work to look bikini? No. Okay, good. Let's change the goal,
Yeah.
right? So it's, you always make sure the client understands how important it is that they make a body they love. Because regardless what
Yeah.
happens, if they love their body, there's going to be a whole lot less resentment towards you and the outcome of a show if it
Yeah.
doesn't happen how they want.
Plus, that show is that one day that you compete in the year, right? You in your body 365, right? So you want to, enjoy the training, right? That's another thing. It's like, what style of training do you like? Do you really like pushing heavy with your lower body, really heavy lifting, etc.? Now, granted, bikini girls also lift heavy. I'm not saying that, but just that style of training that it takes to look a certain physique, right? A figure competitor probably doesn't train exactly how I would train, or they have years and years of building that muscle mass. And I think it's making sure that you're enjoying the training, enjoying the look, enjoying the off season of that look, because that's another thing. It's like you want to feel comfortable in your skin off season and on season.
100%. And that's the same, like you nailed it. Where, when you're
Yeah.
not competing, what do you want to walk around like? What is it like? And it's also being able to you have to understand how much time it takes. If you take a bikini girl to a figure girl, okay, in the off season, this is how much time and effort it's going to be required. This is how much sacrifice it's going to take. Do you want to do that? No, I just kind of want to party on the weekends, have fun, and look good. Okay. And it's, coaches have to be honest with the outcome.
Yeah.
I don't, look at you and saying, oh, wow, she could be the next fitness winner and I'm going to feed her so much smoke. And then all of a sudden you're like, I never wanted to be fitness. And then you look, 6 years later, and you're like, how do I get rid of this?
Right. Yeah. And that happens. It does happen sometimes. We get so caught up in like thinking that that's what we want. And then when we get there, we're like, no.
You're like, oh, no, bad idea. Yep.
No. Yeah. So just listen to your, be transparent with your clients and really allow them to tell you. And you can obviously, as a coach, if you see someone that their body does not fit in that category, advise them as to why and what's needed to be done to get into that category. So those are the takeaways from that. Now, one more thing about, your peak weeks. We mentioned how, some coaches are very meticulous and precise. What are like 3 things that no one tells you about peak week as a coach, right? So what is your approach to peak week, and give us a little bit of insight on that?
The one when it comes with me in peak week, I believe if you look show ready or close to show ready without using all of the tricks and all the little, intricacies, don't. Like just because it's peak week, it doesn't mean you have to follow a pattern. And based on that person's nutrition style, whether it's sodium depleted, carb depleted, based on how their body responds, because throughout that whole prep, what a coach is doing is trying different things to see how the body responds best. So with the peak week, it's the same thing. Don't use foods that you don't normally use. So if you've never had a rice cake, your whole prep, don't start using rice cakes. Use foods that you know how your body will
stay away from rice cakes. Lack of nutrient dense. I don't like rice
cakes. If it
cakes.
Doesn't mold, Cheese Whiz doesn't mold, rice cakes don't mold. In case of emergency, or it's a good way to bring food to your mouth. But the other thing too is also know your limits on what you're comfortable doing. Where if your coach is saying you're going to drink 2 gallons of water for 4 days, you're going to be doing 6 hours of cardio, then you're like, no. Just because it's the week before the show, it doesn't mean take out your morals and do things that you wouldn't be comfortable with. And so, I mean, that's typically like top 3 things that I do. How close are they to show without doing any tricks? Can we just take out some of the aspartames and stuff like that? Sure. What's the category? If I pull out their water, is their face going to disappear?
We talked about this. We had a coaching call with you right before our show, and you compared we have one male athlete that competed on our team. I forgot his name. What was his name again? Lawrence. I spoke with him after show. Sorry, Lawrence. Lawrence, it has that carved, chiseled face, right? Where you don't want a bikini girl to show up on that stage with the carved, chiseled face. Yeah, so that's one of the things. It depends on what place and stage are you stepping on the stage to.
And the last one, there's 2 things you're going to struggle with. It's either being hungry or thirsty.
Yes.
A lot of people, they're good with one and not with the other. Some people are like, I could be hungry. You take that water out, they're like, I can't live. Right? So it's one or the other. And it's, people have to be prepared for it. And as a coach, just because you may have beat someone up and maybe coach beat you up, it doesn't mean you have to return the favor in peak week. It doesn't need to be difficult. It should be the easiest week. You're going to be hungry and thirsty, but it's the last 5 days.
I think that's one of the biggest things, and I could speak from experience with working with you, is seeing how relaxed I was each peak week that we've done. Like the most relaxed, the most like to the point where you're so calm, where you're like, am I too calm? Like, am I too relaxed? Should I be doing extra things like stopping training? Like what? And at first it's like a hesitancy because you think that, oh my God, we're so close. We got to balls to the wall, push and train and like fatigue the crap out of ourselves. But in reality, it's like you're doing your body a disservice. There's no need for that, right? We have to be stage ready show day, but like your body should be looking near ready towards like the last 2 weeks, right? You're to the point where it's just minor details. So that last week should be the most chillaxed week because then your body will thank you and respond the way it needs to when you are relaxed.
And your coach sets that mood too. Like if your coach is like, okay, then it's going to naturally bring you up, right? And I'm always like, I try to stay as calm as possible, but my pet last week, I'm also very strict to keep people in line, where not in line as though they're misbehaving, but just to keep their mind saying, hey, coach, can I stop? Let's focus.
Yeah.
Let's relax. Because if you like, as things are going, their minds are going to start going fast. So I also think it's also the energy that the coach brings into that prep. There's a time to be
Yeah.
amped up, and then there's a time to pull back.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, right? You feed that energy to your clients, and they're already at the, especially when it's like that peak week, they're already so much going on throughout their head, kind of like what we talked about when we mess up, right? It's like that adrenaline, the anxiety, the what if this, and like all the stress in the back of our head about anxiousness of the big day that we've been working for. Adding extra to that does us a disservice. So I think, obviously it depends on the individual and your coaching style, but really be mindful of how the lower the stress, the better the body's going to feel, and the better your client is going to feel, that athlete's going to feel it. And it shows when that week is like cruising weeks are much better than, oh my gosh, type of weeks.
Yep.
And I've had those, and I'm really happy that, like I said, especially the past two shows, I feel like my heart rate is like, I'm like, am I still alive? Like, should I be
Like,
nervous right
is
now?
it
And
something
that never
wrong? Is
happened.
this not the right weekend? Am
Yeah.
I at the right place? Yeah.
But now we talk about peak weeks and getting ready for shows. Now, how do you deal with navigating clients with the post-show blues, right? You have a lot of us right now after the Atlantic City show. What are some of your tips and methods to apply to, your clients post a show?
The biggest thing is, some of the biggest things is making sure they're aware that the body they have from 4 weeks, 6 weeks to show, it's a rental. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the stage. Now,
Yeah.
and it's also being honest with them, saying there's post-show rebound. It's going to be terrible. Where we get out of it is now start making plans, non-fitness related. Make other goals. Wow, I would like to learn to run 5K. Oh, boy, I'd like to stretch. Oh, I'd like to take up clay. Because what you need to do is, as soon as that show's done and you have that deadline, the deadline's reached, and now you're a free agent. There's no penalty for any bad decision. You need to have that focus moved onto something else, or else you're going to be scrambling at everything. And what do we pick first? Bad foods to compensate. So it's have a plan. Okay, when the show's done, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to go play in the gym. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to plan my meal plans out, and I'm going to stick to it because I want to make sure I can keep my body as close to the rental as possible. And it's that dirty bulk. Eat as much as you can for 2-3 days after. You already have the cocaine, sugar in your system. Your body can be up 10 pounds, but it's not going to come off as fast as it did before because your body's into it's into a storage mode. So have plans, have your support system. The same one. Hey guys, I know I'm done the show, but I don't want to balloon up. I don't want to end up in the hospital. Can we only do things maybe once a week? I need your support to get through this so I can get out. And if they're not supporting you, don't hang around them until you're ready or strong enough that you can say no to that extra drink or to that cake or whatever it may be. You have to be ready for the next step.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, especially when you have, whatever your approach is to a competition prep, whether you're flexible or you follow a meal plan or you're more restrictive, when you get closer to the end, you end up having to take foods out just for the sake of bringing in the best physique that you possibly can. So that emotional tie to being like, I'm free, let me stuff my face, your body's like, what the heck are you doing? Right. And I think even with myself, I saw that the day after show, right, I was out of my meal prep. I was like, all right, celebratory pizza. I took bites of that. I had the treats that I wanted, but the next day my body felt like actual shit. Right. So like, and I think it's important to realize is, be mindful of how you're feeling, right? If it makes you happy and you enjoy it, fine, do it. But you have to make sure you're not, feeling guilty after, because then that's building that toxic relationship with food that if you keep on doing it, it can go down a downward spiral. And, it's hard. It's really hard post a show, especially if, your next target is way, way out. So I think, in my case, when we've talked, it's really keeping in mind, all right, what does that champion do post the show? How can I act in a way that will make me that champion when the time comes to do this again? So sometimes we have to hold ourselves accountable and hold responsibility, because it's not your fault. It's not the coach's fault, right? But you can be there at rock for them, but it really comes down to giving them the confidence to take responsibility of the actions that they're choosing to do. And it's hard. It's not easy. We have our days, but it's one of the trickiest parts.
Stop eating like you want to be the before picture, right?
Yes.
And it's the eating and shoveling got you there. It's not going to make you leaner and going back to it. Like your body wants to go back to the before. Stop giving it what it needs to get back there too fast.
Yeah, and you can, if you put in the time and the effort, you will get to a point where you're gonna be eating more food and still liking the way that you look, feeling confident, feeling strong. Got to get through that uncomfortable period just a little bit longer. So, like in my head, when we do competition preps, my prep does not end until maybe a month and a half after my show, where I'm like, okay, I'm getting up there with my calories again. Now I can kind of ease back just a little bit. Unfortunately, that's just how it is, and conditioning my brain to see it that way helps me stay successful
100%.
as well.
100%.
Now, talk to us a little bit about Dominate, right? What is in store for 2022? What are some things you've been working on? Talk to us a little bit more about your coaching business or any other businesses that you have, and what's coming in 2022.
Well, I'm going to stick to the topic of Dominate. There's a lot of things going around outside of the company, but what's happening now is I've been working almost 2 years on it, where I've wanted to take all the champions and take their meal plans and look at the training plans and now create a system that is the ultimate champion maker, because there will be common points that you will find on exercises and nutrition combos. And so what I've done over the past 2 years from trial and error, and we're launching, I've heard in the beginning, well, we have our date, very beginning of January. I'm not going to say the date, but we're launching my online training and nutrition programs. And they're going to be based on what has created the most successful bodies. So and we're going into body types. Oh, you want to be bikini fit? Great. Well, we've had, I think, probably 14 bikini world champions. Fantastic. Here's a training style. Here's a nutrition style, but still based on your likes and the food that you like to have and the equipment that's available. So what I've done now is just created 3 training systems, tier it, and now share the secrets that I didn't want to give out, because again, am I going to be doing this another 22 years? Probably not. Why not start sharing the knowledge, the tips and tricks that I've used onto the next person coming through? Next thing we're coming up as well, we are looking into getting into transformations. So we are creating a transformation team, a transformation crew, where we are going to be doing same thing nutrition, but we're going to have directors and trainers in different cities across the U.S. for now, because we really want to be hitting the mainstream. If you look at, Dominate, what's our mantra? Your health matters, but it's also your mental health matters. And what I want to do now is reach out to as many people as I can that want to get that confidence on that next step. I love working with world champions, but working with people that just want to be able to pick up their kids, or they want to live, or reach and be able to reach the bottom of the dishwasher. Those are the lives that I really want to start changing. So that's what we have a team together. We have Fat Free JC. He's going to be joining up with us, and we're going to be trying to help as many lives as possible, and helping lives is saving lives. So Dominate is still doing the transformations, but I'm putting in all my tips and tricks and secrets into the online training platform. And you know what? We're really pushing on that mental health, because if that's gone, we have nothing left below. That's it.
We have nothing. And I think that's awesome. And to all of our listeners, you have the power to make a change in our world, right? There will never be enough of us, because there's so many, like the amount of people that need us overpower how many of us that there are, how many coaches that there are. Even though it may feel like an oversaturated market, we say this time and time again, there will be people that need you, right? And the more people that we help, the better we create the world, especially when it comes to health and wellness. And it doesn't look the same for everybody, but even just one step in the right direction can be a domino effect of creating healthy relationships with themselves, with their bodies, creating habits that will transfer to their families, to their kids, to their husbands, their significant others. Those are the type of things that we need to be mindful of whenever we are, putting out information out there. And I'm really excited to see what Dominate has in store. You guys can make sure you follow Nathan on Instagram and social. So keep your eyes out for the release dates. He has awesome other businesses like his spice range, which I can't recommend enough. It's my go-to for my preps. And to wrap up our chat today, Nathan, what would be 3 things you'd like to share with those in the fitness industry? What are your 3 takeaways from today's episode?
My thing is, if I had to say 3 things to inspiring coaches, new coaches, and let's just say the veteran coaches, never give up on your North Star. Don't chase fads, because that's just it. Stay true to yourself. Number 2, don't make it all about you. Make it about your client, because that without them, there would be none of us. We'd have nothing. So as much as we want to share on social media about ourselves, take time to make them feel special. Number 3, treat every goal the same. Whether Maria wants to become the next world champion, or there's some lady or guy that wants to lose the first 10 pounds, equal value, equal goal, because that 10 pounds is just as valuable to that world champion. So don't chase what you think will become the most popular. Treat everybody the same, because every goal will always come back. If they're successful, they're going to bring more. And that's the 3 biggest mistakes people are making right now.
Yeah, and I love that. And it's not the amount of progress the person makes or the type of success that person achieves. It's that you giving that same attention keeps bringing more and more people back to you, and you get to affect and influence more and more people. So staying true to I love those takeaways. And Nathan, I appreciate you taking the time to join the podcast. And I'm so happy I was able to introduce you guys to my secret weapon of all things competitive career success. And he is my go-to. He's in my corner. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I cannot